Cool. Hey there, welcome to the next installment of How to Make Anything. In the first video, I showed you how to get a copy of Fusion 360 for free, and today we're actually going to use it to model something cool. Like I said, I want this series to be easy enough for even a beginner to follow along, but I also don't want it to be boring, so I wanted to make something that's actually cool and useful in this very first lesson. So today we're going to make this game of Rota. And this is an ancient Roman game that I discovered when I was at a Roman historical site in Germany with my family. And I played this with my little nephew and he pretty much kicked my butt, but I still thought it was really cool and I really appreciate the simplicity of this game. It's kind of like tic-tac-toe where you take turns putting down pieces, but once each of you have your 3 pieces down, you start taking turns sliding them one space at a time. And the goal, just like tic-tac-toe, is to get 3 in a row. But you kind of have to figure out a way to push your opponent and manipulate your way to get those 3 in a row. I think there's a little more strategy to it than tic-tac-toe. In today's lesson, we're gonna make this little travel-sized version of the game, and it's got magnets in it so that the pieces snap right into place. It's really satisfying to play with, and it also keeps them from getting lost. So it's really fun, it looks cool, it's not too tough to make. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to make it. If you're planning to actually follow along, you'll probably have to pause this video a few times and re-watch some parts, but if you really pay attention and you put the time into it, you will be able to make this game just based on the information that I give you in this video. If that sounds cool to you, keep watching, because we're gonna do it right now. So before going into Fusion 360, I did some concept sketches. Whenever you're doing something even a little bit complicated, it's nice to sketch it out on paper first to really figure out what you're gonna do. And that'll save you some time when you're actually modeling it on your computer. So here I kind of figured out the pieces and I decided to go pretty simple, just this disc with a magnet in the center, and that's what's gonna hold it to the board. So if I kind of do this cross section of the board, you can see how a magnet will be embedded on the bottom, and then I'll have a magnet on the top of the piece. That way there's a good gap in between that makes sure they don't stick too well. It'll be just the right amount of stickiness with these particular magnets. The board is super simple, and since it's a round game, I decided to just make the whole thing round so that it's as small as possible. One tool that I do highly recommend is a good digital caliper, because it's really useful for getting very precise measurements of objects like this magnet, and it's also good for just generally figuring out the size you want to design things, because when you're designing on a computer, you don't have the thing right in front of you. So this is good for figuring out how big it'll actually be. So now we'll go ahead and enter Fusion. In the first video, I showed you how to move around a bit, and I think normally this layout grid is on, but I turn it off because I like it blank. You can also navigate by dragging around this little cube here or clicking on the different faces. But the first thing we're gonna do is start a sketch. And the sketch is basically a 2-dimensional drawing that you'll later convert into a 3D object. So I'll click Create Sketch, and then I'm going to choose the top plane to draw on. You always have to draw on some kind of plane or a flat surface on your model. Let's go ahead and start by drawing a circle. You can see here that the shortcut for that is C, and I think it's always great to learn the shortcuts as soon as possible because they save a lot of time. So anyways, we're going to do that circle right from the origin, which is the center point of the whole document. And then I'm going to draw this circle and go down again in the sketch tools and find this sketch dimension tool. Shortcut D. The dimension tool lets you select things you've drawn and give them a precise measurement. So I'm going to click on this circle and we're going to make that 15 millimeters for the size of my game piece. We're just going to start with that to keep things simple. So now we have to take this 2-dimensional circle and turn it into a 3D shape. So we'll do that with these create tools. Those are the ones that turn sketches into 3D objects. And the most common is extrude. The shortcut for that is E, but you can also just click up on this icon since it is the most common thing. So once that's selected, we have to choose the profile, which is a closed shape that we can extrude. In this case, we're going to use this circle, and you can drag it up and create a 3D cylinder just like that. And you can see that measurement on the side that's highlighted. We're going to type in 4 to make this 4 millimeters thick. So there we go. Now we just need to make a hole for the magnet to sit in. So I'm going to click on the top surface of that piece and then start a new sketch. So that'll start drawing on that top circle. And I'll go ahead and type C to open that circle tool again.
and draw a smaller circle in the middle. Then I'll hit D for dimension, select that smaller circle, and give it the proper dimension to hold onto my magnet. So the magnet was about 6 millimeters, but we also have to add a bit of clearance so that there's room for it to fit in. So you can actually do the math inside of the dimension. I'm just gonna do 6 millimeters plus 0.15, and you can see it gets to that size. After you've created a dimension, you can always double click on it and change it. So let's go ahead and turn this into 6.3. So we'll add 0.3 millimeters clearance instead. So now let's go ahead and extrude again, select that smaller circle, and instead of dragging up and adding onto the part, you can drag into the part and cut away. So that's what we want to do, make a little hole for the magnet, and we'll go ahead and make that -3 millimeters, equal to the height of the magnet. Alright, there we have our basic game piece, and another cool way to look at your model is with a cross section. So you can go over here to Inspect and select Section Analysis. Then we'll go over here and click this light bulb next to this Origin tab, and that'll turn on all the basic planes, as you can see, and we're going to select the right plane to create that section analysis through that plane. So it's basically slicing the whole model along that right plane so that you can see inside and kind of get a better idea of what's happening on the inside of your model. So you can see there's the space for the magnet and a little bit of plastic underneath so that there's something for the magnet to rest on top of and for us to glue it into. That cross section will be under this Analysis tab. It's section 1 here, and you can turn it on and off whenever you like. Now, to make this model look a little nicer, we're going to add a chamfer, and a quick way to do that is to hit S, which opens up this model toolbox. Then you could type in any type of tool or command and select it from there. So let's go ahead and just type in chamfer, and there you go, it shows you the option. So chamfer basically lets you select edges and then add a face in between the two. It's pretty useful because when you have a square edge like this, it'll create this 45-degree face. When you have the equal distance setting, it'll always be 45 degrees, and that's the perfect overhang for something that you're 3D printing. So this will be printable, and it'll also make it easier to remove from the build plate while making the whole thing just look a little nicer. It's nice to have not so sharp of corners, you know? By the way, if you click this little monitor, you could change the visual style, so we can get rid of those hidden edges and make our image look a little cleaner. It's nice for getting a better idea of what the part will actually look like. Anyways, that's our game piece. That's all there is to it. So next, it's just time to make the actual game board. So I'm gonna start another sketch, and I'm gonna select this top plane again, the same one that we used to draw the game piece, but we're gonna work our way down instead. So I'll select that, I'll hit C to make another circle, starting from the center again, and then I'll go ahead and create the outer edge of the game board, and then I'll also draw another circle to represent the circle that the actual game is played on. Now I can just drag those circles and resize them in relation to this game piece to figure out the most compact size for this little travel version of the game. So I'll make that a little smaller, and we can actually preview what it'll look like with all the pieces on there. If we make this circle that's 15 millimeters like the game piece, I'm going to select that and then go down here to circular pattern, and that'll let me pattern this around the center point, and I'm going to make the quantity 8 because there's 8 spots around the game. So that allows us to see what it would look like if all the pieces were filled. You can see that there's a good gap in between all the circles, and they'd be able to slide into the center from any position. So that means that this ring is a pretty good size for the game. We'll go ahead and just cancel that. We just wanted to preview what it would look like. And I'll delete this circle as well. Now let's add our dimension to this circle to lock it in. We know that this 55 millimeters is a good size. As for the outside ring, let's just keep it where it is for now at around 90 millimeters. You might have noticed when we added that dimension, the circles went from blue lines to black, and that means they're fully defined, fully locked into place. It's usually good to have things fully defined like that, but we'll get more into that in another video. You can see when I'm moving my mouse over this circle, it highlights only part of the whole circle at once, because this inner circle is kind of splitting it. But if I select it and hit X, or if you right click and go down to turn it into a construction line right here, that turns that from a real sketch line into a reference line, so it doesn't affect the selection. We don't actually need that inner circle because we're just making the game board first. So we're going to do another extrusion and extrude this downwards. And let's go ahead and make that 7 millimeters. And because this extrusion is touching the game piece, Fusion 360 automatically tries to join them together, but we want to make these two separate parts. So we're actually going to open up that drop down and change it from join to new body. That'll make sure that they're two separate parts. When you have two separate parts like this, it's good to distinguish them. So we'll right click on the game piece, go to appearance, and then we're going to go find another visual style. Let's just select this green plastic and drag that over the piece. And now you can see that it's a separate color, so we know it's two different pieces. Alright, next up we're going to draw the graphics for the game on top of the board. So we can select that top surface and create a sketch, and now we'll go ahead and start drawing. First of all, we need to draw that circle that we drew in the previous sketch. And to bring that back, we can drop this down and turn on the last sketch, and there you can see the circle that we drew earlier. So now I'll just go ahead and hit C to draw another circle from the center and line it up to that circle. And we'll actually hit D and give it that 55mm dimension again. So now we have the measurement for the circle, but it's just a thin circle. It doesn't have any thickness. So we're going to select it and go down to this offset tool, shortcut O, and that allows us to create a line that's a certain distance from the original. So let's go 1mm outward, and then we'll go ahead and select that line again, do another offset, but this one's going to be inward 1mm to give us a total thickness of 2mm for that ring. That's the outer ring, and the next thing we want to do are draw the 8 dots that go all around the ring. So I'm going to draw this little circle straight up from the center and on that center line, and we'll go ahead and give that dimension. So I'm thinking 4mm will be a good little dot. I also want a gap in between the circle and the lines, so I'm going to offset this circle to create that gap. So we'll play around with that offset, and I think 2mm will be a good measurement. I'll do a circular pattern with those two objects selected, and we'll make the quantity 8 again. So now we have those 8 dots all around the circle. And I almost forgot we need a circle in the center as well, so let's go ahead and drop down this body tab and turn off the game piece. So now we can only see the board, and we can draw another circle with a circle around that. And we could just add dimensions to this center circle, but a better way to do this is to use constraints. If we select this small center circle and this circle above it, we can right click and add a constraint. So let's make them equal. Now if I go back and change the dimension of this top circle, the inner circle updates as well. So they're basically connected. Whatever happens to one happens to the other. We can do that for this outer ring as well. And you can see if I make this outer ring bigger, the center ring gets bigger also. So that's kind of how constraints work. And we'll get more into those in future videos as well. Finally, we need to draw the straight lines that connect from the center to all the outward points. So I'll press L on my keyboard to draw a straight line. And then just like with the circle, I'm going to do 2 offsets, 1mm in each direction. I'll select that center line, hit X to make it a construction line, and now I'll take those 2 outer lines and do another circular pattern. Just like with the dots, this origin will be my center point, and I'll have a quantity of 8 so that they line up with all those circles. So there we go, that's pretty much all the lines we need in our sketch in order to create this graphic. So we'll go ahead and use the extrude tool again, and now we have all these different profiles, but we're just going to select the ones that we actually want to be part of the graphic. So basically everything that I'm selecting in blue, I'm going to cut into this board, and you can see I'm leaving that gap in between the circle and the lines, and that's just a stylistic choice. I'll go around and do that for all of these different lines and dots, just selecting the ones that I actually want to cut. You can see there's gaps between all the lines and dots, and you'll see it a little bit clearer when I actually extrude this. So let's cut it down into the board. We just want to do a little bit of an inlaid graphic. And for the thickness, let's do something like -1, maybe -1.4mm. That'll be a nice thickness that allows me to swap out the colors while I'm 3D printing this to get 2 different color graphics. Now at this point, I'm noticing that the outer edge of the game board is a little bigger than it needs to be, and we're trying to make this super compact. So we're gonna go back and change that by using this timeline. So this thing at the bottom is the timeline for our project, and each of the little icons is one step in the process of making this model. That's one of the coolest things about Fusion 360, is that every step of the process is saved on this timeline, and you can go back and change any of it. We can drag this little line backwards and basically take us back in time, back before we made that cut, all the way back to when we were just making this game piece. But the step that we want to edit is this sketch right here. So we'll right click on it and go to Edit Sketch, and then you can see we're taken back to this earlier sketch where I can change this outer dimension from 90 millimeters over to 80. And when I stop the sketch, it updates everything, and now we have the same exact board but with a smaller circle on the outer edge. It's pretty great how easy it is to make changes like that, and that's why I love Fusion 360 for making functional things where you have to update and make little changes like that. Next up, we want to round the corners for these lines a little bit just to make it look a little nicer. And we're going to do that with a fillet. So we'll go up to Modify here and select Fillet. The shortcut for that is F. And the fillet basically rounds a corner. So if I select this edge and drag it, you can see it rounds that out. So we're going to do that for all the edges on the lines here. And we'll make that 1 millimeter to make this perfectly round. So now we'll go around and hold Control to select additional edges. And we're going to select all those edges at the ends of these lines. So let's zoom through that, and here you can see the end result with all the lines being capped by these rounded edges. I think it looks a lot nicer. It's clean, it's simple, it's what I want. By the way, not only can you edit sketches, but you can also edit features. So let's go ahead and go back to this extrude, and now we can actually change the depth that this was extruded. So for example, we can make it -10, and then it cuts all the way through the board. That would be cool if we weren't using magnets and just wanted a very clear way to show the graphics. But for this version, let's just make it a -1 millimeter cut, so it's nice and shallow. So there are the graphics for the game. Now we just need holes on the bottom to insert the magnets that go onto the board. We could start a sketch on the bottom and create the hole from there, but I'm actually going to start the sketch on the top surface because I want those holes to be a certain distance from the top. So I'll select that face, hit Create Sketch, and now I'll start adding in some circles that are the correct size to hold onto the magnets. We're using the same magnets as we did for the game piece, so we'll make that circle 6.3 millimeters, and then we'll do that on the outside circles as well. So I'll go up to this top one, and you can see that the circle tool kind of snaps to the center. Then I could select that circle and the center one, and give those the equal constraint, which will make sure they're always the same size. I'll select this outer circle, and then do another circular pattern just like before, and repeat it around the circle 8 times. Perfect, so let's do another extrude cut, and we're going to select the profiles for all those circles that we need to cut out. Then I'm going to drag it down all the way, but we don't want these holes going all the way through the board, so I'm going to select Offset Plane here, and offset it by -2 millimeters to have the cut start 2 millimeters lower inside the board. We'll accept that, and now we can actually go back to this section analysis we did early on and see what that looks like from the cross view. And we can see those pockets we made for the magnets, but there's a pretty thin little piece of plastic right here. Maybe we want to make that a little bit thicker. So I'm going to right click on that last extrude we did, and let's change the offset to -2.4 just to make it a little bit thicker. There we go, that should be better. Finally, let's add some chamfers around the edge here as well. You can do it by hitting S, but the chamfer tool can also be found under Modify right there. And we're going to select these 2 edges and give it the same chamfer that the game piece had. So I think that was actually 0.7 millimeters. There we go. And that just gives it the same look, makes it nice and cohesive. It's good to keep things consistent as often as you can. And let's actually go ahead and edit that chamfer once more. We're going to add them to the edges around all these little magnet holes as well, because that'll just make it a little bit easier to insert the magnets when this is printed out. So I'll go ahead and hit Control and select all of those, and add the chamfer to those circles as well. All right, there we have it. That is our fully complete Rota board. Now it's just time to save these as STL files so that we can 3D print them. So we'll select each body individually out of this body panel, and we can go ahead and change the refinement here to medium. If you zoom in, you can see all the little triangles that the 3D model will be made out of. Basically, when you create an STL, it converts this perfect cylinder into a bunch of little triangles, and that's a format that's easier to use with 3D printers. Let's save the game board as well, save that as an STL, and for this one, since it's a little larger, we actually are going to set the refinement to high to make it a nice, smooth outer circle. All right, there we go. We've got our 2 STL files, and now we'll go ahead and print them out. We're gonna print the game board first, and you can see I'm scraping the build surface here to clean it up, and also rubbing it down with some isopropyl alcohol to make the surface really clean, because we're gonna print it face down. That way the top of the print is really smooth. And after about 1 millimeter of printing, I swapped out the filament from this Matter Hackers metallic gold to their white Pro PLA, and that's gonna create these 2-color graphics on my game board. Now, some of you might be wondering how to get to this stage of 3D printing from having a 3D model. You have to use a slicer to prepare the file for 3D printing, and that's something that I'll get into in another video. This one was really just about modeling something in Fusion 360. So here you can see the whole print is now covered in white filament, so that that white will show through the gold top to have those 2-color graphics. And then I'm gonna switch back to gold, that way the bottom of the game board is also gold. And here's the final model, which came out super great. You can see there's that little section of white that just fills in those graphics. And of course I printed out those little game pieces as well, 3 for one team, 3 for the other. And now it's time to add the magnets. So I'm gonna glue them into place with this E6000 adhesive, which is really great. I'll just put a little dab in each of these holes and then push the magnets into place. I'll test the magnet on the other side here to make sure it's facing the right way. And then I'm gonna glue magnets into the game pieces as well. All right, those are all glued in. The magnets are repelling each other, so that means I put them in the right way. And here's the final result. Like I said, it's really fun to play around with. The pieces just snap into position. It's super satisfying. And this larger version was made with the exact same file. I just changed some of the dimensions so that the game pieces are a little larger and the board itself is a little larger. But it's pretty much the exact same process to make this larger version, which is also pretty fun.
Alright guys, we did it. We modeled this game in Fusion 360 from scratch. And I hope you guys thought it was a fun lesson. I thought it was a really fun project. And hopefully you learned a lot. If you didn't want to follow along, or if you ran into some problems along the way, I'll actually put a link in the description to the Fusion 360 file for this project. So you can actually download that and open it up and play around with the file that I already made. Make different sizes, make different variations, or turn it into a different game. Whatever you want to do, it's free for you to use. Well, I kind of do hope that you followed along, because we are going to be using these same skills and learning some new tools in the next episode of How to Make Anything. So it's going to build on top of itself until you're a total pro. If you do make a variation of this or something entirely different based on what you learned in this video, I would love to see it. And you can share it with me at makeanything.design/community, which will lead you to my Make Anything subreddit, where you can share photos of all your projects and stuff. All right, that's it for this lesson. So until next time, I'm Devin. This is Make Anything. Don't forget to stay inspired.